Greetings, gaming historians, and welcome to Lord of Lore, where we break down the lore and history of our favorite games and fantasies. Today, we're going back into the world of Amalur to discuss one of the most influential races in all of Amalur's history, the Gnomes. While not a playable race in the Game of Reckoning, the Gnomish society has a huge role to play both in the game's story and in the world around it. Divided into castes and focusing on knowledge, theory, and study, the Gnomes are often considered the greatest scholarly minds in the known world. It was through the Gnomes the Well of Souls was created and the Fateless One was born, and it is in the great city of Edessa that the world's greatest minds study magic and world theory. But where did the Gnomes come from, and what part did they play in Amalur's history? Let's discuss. Our earliest record of Gnomes takes place shortly after the disappearance of Erythale. After the Arathi left the world, only 3 races had any fragments of their teachings and findings: the Matharans, the Losilfar, and the Gnomes. The Gnomes were particularly interested in the texts that discussed the aspects of mortality and fate. As the Gnomes grew and expanded, they devoted themselves to study and scholarship. To organize their efforts and society, the Gnomes divided their society into 4 castes: the Templars, the Praetorians, the Scholars, and the Auspices. Each caste was equal but played their own role. Templars were politicians and planners, usually involved with organizing laws and funding projects. Praetorians were soldiers and warriors that protected and enforced Gnomish society. Scholars were scientists and researchers that led studies in Gnome interests, and Auspices were priests and historians that handled religious duties and lore. These castes voted together in the Forum when deciding Gnome policies, and because Templars often sided with Praetorians and Scholars sided with Auspices, there was an even balance of power between the castes. When the vote was too even to make a verdict, the tie would be broken by the Common House, a group that represented the interests of workers and independent citizens. Regardless of their caste, all Gnomes were allowed to hold their own beliefs and seek their own goals, but they were required to uphold strict codes of conduct and abide by even stricter procedures and formalities. One consistent aspect of the Gnome society was their desire to stay neutral in the conflicts of the kingdoms around them. Rather than taking sides or getting involved with foreign politics, the Gnomes tried to help and contribute to every race regardless of their views, offering their inventions and findings to others while asking for little in return. In fact, the Gnomes rarely made any major establishments of their own, instead spreading themselves out into other kingdom settlements to spread their influence and ideals. While seemingly focused entirely on philanthropy and neutrality, the Gnomes were not without their own goals. Though they had strict codes of morality and behavior, the Gnomes were no stranger to ambitious ideas and extreme methods. Any Gnomes that showed incredible potential were often given permission to bypass certain codes in order to further their studies, and Templars made sure to keep such experiments private and secured to prevent tarnishing their noble image. Eventually, the Gnomes moved to the Feylands in order to build relationships with the surrounding kingdoms, bringing their precious artifacts and sacred texts with them. To preserve these important relics, the Auspices took these artifacts, including fragments of the Arathi's Codex of Order, and moved to a distant island known as Acre. Here, the Auspices built a great monastery and kept the location of the island a secret. Over the centuries, the Gnomes continued to carry out their studies and build relationships with other kingdoms, but as they grew, so did political tensions. As previously mentioned, the Templars and Praetorians were often at odds with the Scholars and Auspices, and because the Scholars and Auspices often sided with the interests of the common people, the frequent stalemates were given to the Common House and passed in the Scholars and Auspices' favor. The Templars, the most politically ambitious of the castes, were frustrated that they were unable to achieve their goals. Eventually, in 2807 BE, there was a Templar by the name of Orjan des Palmes who hated the religious Auspices. And when the Auspices delayed a meeting of the Forum in order to attend a religious festival, des Palmes delivered a drunken rant where he complained about the religious order. Making matters worse, there was an acquaintance of des Palmes who was secretly an enemy agent, and he purposefully kept refilling the Templar's goblet with wine to keep him drunk. Eventually, des Palmes got so drunk that he revealed the location of the Auspices' island monastery. The gossip of this revelation spread like wildfire until it was received by the Tirgash, a brutal race of orcs who love to raid and plunder. Setting sail for Acre, the Tirgash raided the monastery, stole most of the Gnomish relics, and nearly wiped out all of the Auspices within. This tragedy left the Auspice caste too weak to continue as their own caste, and so it was that the surviving Auspices were absorbed into the Scholars, and as a result, the political power shifted to favor the Templars, and the Common House became little more than an advisor. When the gnomes searched the ruins of the monastery, they discovered pieces of the Codex of Order that spoke of fate and mortality. These findings inspired the gnomes to seek out a new goal, one that would let them overcome death and even fate itself, the Well of Souls. Later in their history, the gnomes distributed their information to powerful kingdoms, hoping that new allies would help them achieve their goals in making the Well of Souls. One of the most promising kingdoms was the Corthian Empire, so the gnomes sent Templar Emily Denard to work with them. However, the Corthians soon grew in decadence and began to conquer the worlds around them, and Templar Denard took the opportunity to carry out terrible experiments that benefited the Wells of Souls project. When the Corthians were finally defeated, the gnomes denied all connections with Denard and sent the Praetorians to hunt her down. Denard was never found and her experiments were quickly put away, but it would be a long time before the gnomes could fully wash away the stain Denard had placed on gnomish society. Later on, the world of Amalur entered the Age of Arcana, where magic grew and was given to the lesser races. With the rise of magic offering new power and potential, the gnomes finally decided to build a city that would serve as the capital of their studies and interests. In the deserts of Datir, the gnomes built the great city of Edessa, and it was built as the center of learning and knowledge and offered its greatness to all. However, with the establishment of Edessa, the Well of Souls project was resumed in full, particularly under the guidance of Templar Octien. Shortly before the Crystal War began, Templar Octien discovered a scholar with the potential to finally complete the Well of Souls, a scholar known as Fomerus Hughes. Thank you so much for watching, and feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and remember to drop a like and subscribe so my channel can grow new videos every week. God bless.